I actually tried to stop by the house today, but there was no one around. One kind of, I guess, thing that I would say about this topic is that in policing, we have to be really careful about there's a lot of authority that a police officer has, and a lot of people are intimidated by the police. We have the right to stop people and question them, but not just anybody that we want, or we have to have valid legal reasons to do so. My point is I think that the tough part about this is there's obviously a neighborhood that is concerned about fears. I think that one thing that has happened that has been a significant change that I hope the neighbors realize that they did do is they kept a facility that was potentially going to house sex offenders, and I think the people running the facility, they pivoted, and it's now a treatment facility for women, is my understanding.
A sober living house, it's not a treatment facility.
Okay, sorry. But the position that we're in as police officers is wanting to make sure that that neighborhood feels safe. The thing that we cannot do is start knocking on doors and stopping neighbors and asking if they live in a certain house, just for no other reason that because they're living in a place that is designed to help them successfully get out of whatever treatment program or get off of whatever kind of addiction that they have. We just can't do that. There's no legal reason for us to be stopping people, and we would be in a position where we could be liable for doing that, for basically hassling people for no other reason than because they're being aided in trying to get clean. Now, if there's criminal activity, we will show up and our ear will be to the floor, looking and listening for something like that. But we have to be very careful in what we do as police officers to make sure that we're doing everything legal and fair to everybody that's in the community.
Let me ask you one more question, Chief. There are other facilities of this kind in Oregon City?
Several.
And as a general rule, have there been any issues with any of these other facilities?
No. I think if the people going through this generally need to be supported, and I think that their rate of success is much higher if they're in an environment where they're held accountable and where they're supported in their recovery. That's our experience.
All right. Anything else from staff? All right, so we're now at citizen comments. Citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to present information relevant to the city but not listed as an item on the agenda. Please, if you haven't done so already and you plan on speaking, fill out a comment card. They're in the back and hand it to the city recorder. The City Commission does not generally engage in dialogue with those making comments, but may refer the issue to the city manager. Complaints should be first addressed at the department level prior to addressing the City Commission. And obviously, that has already taken place. I want to remind folks of the rules of the commission. We do not allow personal attacks either on ourselves, city staff, or anyone else in the city. So please limit your comments to the relevant information that you want to present. So first up, we have Patrick Rechtenwald and Sue-Ann Imhoff. Welcome.
Thank you.
If you just state your name and city of residence for your record, please.
My name is Patrick Rechtenwald, Oregon City.
Okay.
Before I read my prepared statement, I do want to point out that the Community Development Director, the Mayor, and the Chief of Police referred to this house as a facility a couple minutes ago. On March 2nd, 2018, at 1:45 p.m., myself and the other neighbors on Roosevelt Street received an official answer from Community Development Director Laura Turway regarding our concerns about the inappropriate use of a home located at 523 Roosevelt Street. Her response states that after examining all the related city code and statute, that she had determined that there's no reason to rezone the house located at 523 Roosevelt Street, stating it meets the typical use of an R6 family dwelling. The community development director, in her own words, stated that to require a conditional use permit, there would have to be evidence of treatment or care being a requirement. We were supplied a brief summary of the business plan submitted by the organization Free on the Outside and the intended use of the house, including the requirement of treatment programs and urine analysis to be performed on the residents by an on-site manager. Free on the Outside's business model acknowledges that this house is a residential facility. Myself and the neighbors' concern is that if this is to be a treatment or drug and alcohol-free facility, that the city appropriately require the standard conditional use permit and licensing that is required by city and state law. Myself and the neighbors on Roosevelt Street were shocked that the community development director decided to ignore city code by her own admission, and as I recall, at a February 27th meeting with myself and two other neighbors, did not thoroughly research state law to come to her decision. She stated she rarely refers to state law because city code is usually more thorough in wording. The fact is, many state laws and language exist on the exact business structure referred to Free on the Outside is proposing. In this case, city code was very nonspecific and had very nonspecific wording other than it's referred to as a facility, which requires licensing and a conditional use permitting process and city approval, which the community development director decided was not needed. This is an injustice to the neighbors on Roosevelt Street and every tax-paying and voting citizen of Oregon City who expects and assumes this is a city of law and order.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sue Ann Imhoff, and I live on Roosevelt Street in Oregon City. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak tonight about a topic that's really close to my heart. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm employed by the Oregon Department of Corrections. I've served a diverse population, working in both male and female correctional institutions, as well as in community mental health. I've been a program manager for domestic violence services in Umatilla County, and we had shelters as well as satellite offices. And when working on my master's degree in social work a few years ago, the topic of my research was homelessness. And that actually resulted in some citywide interest and a lot of positive response. There are a staggering number of felons re-entering our county. There are inadequate resources to help stabilize these persons, resources which are critical in minimizing recidivism. There is a need for housing, substance treatment, mental health treatment, domestic violence services, medical care, educational opportunities, employment opportunities, and as you mentioned, Officer Band, general support. A few of the common thinking errors of people who engage in criminal activity are, I'm smarter than most people. I can get away with things other people get caught doing. I'm really not interested in the opinion of others. If I can't do it quickly, I'm not interested. I can do what I want while others must follow the rules. God is on my side. I'll intimidate others to get what I want. I make excuses to avoid taking responsibility. If authorities treated me fairly, I wouldn't be in as much trouble as I am. Don't be alarmed if you recognize having any of these thoughts. Everyone does. What differentiates a criminal is their number of thinking errors, the impact their errors have on others, and the extent to which they impact all areas of a criminal's life and functioning. The most recent recidivism data by the Oregon Department of Corrections shows 55% of those who released in the last 4 years were arrested for a new crime, and 4 out of 5 of them were convicted. Given this information regarding the criminal's attitude, orientation, and post-release history, does the city of Oregon City want them dropped off into a residential neighborhood without reputable professionals, thereby increasing their vulnerability to reoffend? Does the city really want tax-paying citizens to be easy targets of their crimes? I trust your answer is no. And I implore Oregon City to carefully and painstakingly consider the future of our neighborhoods, the future of those who will re-enter our city post-incarceration, and I ask that this please be a major topic of future planning goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, William Gifford and Bob Mahoney.
I wasn't speaking to that subject.
I know.
Okay. This is citizen comment, so come comment.
Okay. I'll let Joe go first for continuity's sake.
Copy that. Mr. Gifford,
Continuity?
the floor is yours.
I can't spell it, so just.
You've never cared about that before, Bob. Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. And I wanted to give some kudos tonight to our police force. Last night, I was on my way. We took a walk before we went to our neighborhood association, and just outside of my bedroom window, there was a car parked in the dark, in the shadows, with two male individuals in it. I thought it was a little peculiar. And so we went on our walk, came back, they're still there. So then we went to our neighborhood association meeting, drove out, the car was still there. When we came back, a couple hours later, it was still there. And something seemed a little hinky about it. And so I happen to have, as every citizen in Oregon City should have, the phone number for the non-emergency number. This is not a crime in process. 503-655-8211. I called the number. A pleasant dispatcher took my information and said that something would be done about it. That's fine. They're right outside my bedroom window, and I was watching TV in there, and in less than a half an hour, I heard car doors slamming, and a few minutes later, I got a telephone call from caller ID unknown, which I'm always suspicious of. Who is this? This is the Oregon City Police. We're following up on your call, William, about having that car out there. Thanks for the call. The two individuals in the car each had a warrant out for their arrest for some. I won't describe the offenses that they were out for, and they're not there anymore. And it was handled so professionally and so promptly and such an easy thing to do that citizens need to realize they can take situations in their hands. I did not confront these individuals, of course, but following the proper channels of calling non-emergency number, police responded promptly and professionally, and I appreciate it. So, thanks.
Thank you. Bob?
Bob Mahoney, resident of Oregon City. I'm here speaking primarily for myself, and I'm here reluctantly. I read in the paper the other day that the city's having some obstacles thrown in their way after acting in good faith on the legacy program, and I want to strongly advise and encourage that we consider eminent domain on that property. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of public interest involved and a lot of public funds that have been spent up to this point for what could possibly be a tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of economic development in the Oregon City area related to that site. And for us to naively sit here and think that everything is from this point on going to run smoothly is a very dangerous tact for us to take. And we should keep that in the back of our mind. I don't mean that we should use it as a hammer, but we should use it wisely, so to speak, because now we're dealing with the public interest. And a lot of money has been spent up this time, a lot of public interest, a lot of public effort. And I don't like to threaten anybody with it, but it's a method by which we could be successful for the public interest. So keep that in mind. Whenever we enter into negotiations, whether it be zoning, planning, or ordinances of that nature, this community has always acted in good faith. And I hope that whoever we deal with on the other side of the table is doing the same thing. And up to this point, I don't see a lot of evidence that I can hang my hat on. There's been too many stumbling blocks. And I think we all know it. I think we ought to just pay attention, start getting serious about it now, instead of playing patty cake. So that's all I have to say, and thank you for your time.
Bob, I just want to say one thing about that. One of the biggest hindrances to us using eminent domain at that site is that part of the legal stuff for the Metro open space bond money that's being put into the project prevents us from using eminent domain for anything that they're using open space bond money on. So in their charter, they say it has to be a willing seller. So that's just one of the considerations. I just wanted you to be aware of that.
What started out to be somewhat of a simple project, I can see how complicated it is and how frustrating it is.
It was never going to be a simple project.
I know that. You know, but just look at the money involved.
Right.
You know, for $2 or $3 million, could have been in the public sector. We'd have had control over it. We could have scheduled the
You're preaching
development.
to the choir, Bob.
I know that.
Okay.
But in so doing, we're going to have to call time out here and say, okay, time out. You know,
All right.
Enough is enough.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So we have Christine Van Order.
Okay. All right. Hello. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'll try to make this quick. I appreciate all the attention that the community members have brought to these sex offender houses and other transitional houses. I am a felon myself. I have needed reentry resources. I advocate for them. Any chance I get. I know how important these houses are for people that are transitioning into the community. It's going to happen. We want to provide as much as possible. However, there has been, because of my involvement in going to the reentry task force meetings that held on the state level, what I found out was very disturbing. And that is that the truth about these houses was hidden from people because they were insured and marketed as A&D houses, even when it served only sex offenders, and specifically sex offenders that are required as a condition of release to receive sex offender treatment. So there are some places that are regarded as treatment services. I don't think this one here is, but they are some very expensive services being given. And the reason that Paul Solomon from Sponsors in Lane County and Eugene said that why it was better to have them sprinkled in residential neighborhoods was because it had no impact on recidivism. And of course, Lumber's, well, that's not that, yeah, it doesn't matter where you put them next to a bus line so they can get to where they're going and all that good stuff. But when I think of recidivism, I think, well, that's not our fault that it has no impact on recidivism, because I do know that there have been houses over in my neighborhood where a man had to chase a guy out of his yard twice because he had 3 little kids, and this was the house where the TriMet barber was being housed at the time I was doing my research. So that guy's already back in prison, and half of the people at that specific house were on abscond status because once their time in that house runs out, if they don't have a job and resources on their own, a lot of them do end up homeless. That's why there was such a push
folks. I apologize for the technical difficulty. Apparently, we had a switch back there go down for some unknown reason. So why don't you start over, sir? Name and city for the record, please.
Thank you. Martin Imhoff, Oregon City, Roosevelt Street resident. And during the break, I passed out to Ms. Riggs copies of Sue Ann's statement and some copies of a Oregon Department of Corrections issue brief that had the most recent recidivism rates. And Sue Ann was saying a lot of words, but the scary one on there, to me, is 55% of the people that were released 4 years ago have been arrested, and 4 out of those 5 have been convicted. Not all felonies, but that's like holy crap numbers that people don't often hear. So I just wanted to point that out. I noticed during Ms. Turway's statement that she said that during the course of her investigation, these aren't the exact words you used, but the statement of use was changing. And Chief Band pointed out that Free on the Outside pivoted their position. We, the neighbors, are not people who want to hinder the recovery of people who need this recovery. If the present use of 523 Roosevelt Street that Ms. Turway has approved is legal, we will each find our own way to adjust to it. But please know that the way Free on the Outside handled themselves in February put them in a really deep hole of mistrust. And that's not good for those people. And we don't know quite how to handle that. And we're not coming here asking you for help about that. This is a statement of the lay of the land. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Is there anybody else? All right.
Thank you.
So I'm going to make one short statement, and that is that I spoke with a board member of Free on the Outside earlier today. That person committed to me that, one, this is going to be a female-only sober living facility, and 2, that there will be no post-prison supervision or anyone on parole in this facility. So, I hope that allays some fears. I would encourage the neighbors to have a discussion with the board members or with the board of Free on the Outside, schedule a meeting. Clackamas County has a dispute resolution service that is either low cost or free, and find a way to, get past this. Because as of right now, I am being told that the city has no ability to prevent this from going on. So beyond that, we'll move on. So we're on to, and before I do that, we're going to pull item 6D, PC 18-032. Apparently the wrong staff report was issued, so we'll have that on our next meeting. And now we will move on to.
We're not pulling it. Oh. Okay.
Public hearings 18-126, first and second reading of ordinance number 18. That was the wrong one I pulled. I apologize. We're pulling 6A, 18-126. And that'll be on our next meeting in March. So now we are on to PC 18-033, McLaughlin Neighborhood Association fee waiver request for planning appeal file AP 17-02. Ms. Turway.
Thank you. Assistant City Attorney Carrie Richter with our legal disclosures.
Okay, so this is a two-party appeal of an HRB decision approving the Public Works facility design. I'm going to do the quasi-judicial hearing disclosures now, and then we're going to proceed with a fee waiver request that has been filed by one of the appellants, and then we're going to move on to the substance of the appeal. So I'm going to try to only have to read these disclosures once. If anybody interested in this hearing would come into this room now so I don't have to read it twice, I'd be grateful. But we'll see. Public hearing on a land use matter is scheduled for tonight. A staff report has been prepared and has been made available to the public 7 days before tonight's hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to this proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria along with written comments and input received through the public notification process. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps that we are going to follow tonight are going to be provided by Ms. Robertson Gardner in the staff report. The HRB has approved an application, and that matter has been appealed before the City Commission for a final decision. The city's commission review is on the of an appeal is on the record, so argument is allowed, but no new evidence. Also, the review is limited to the issues raised in the notice of appeal. Anyone who wishes to speak in this matter should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the city recorder. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and whether you reside or have business within the city and whether or not you participated in the proceedings before the Historic Review Board. All argument should be directed to the applicable approval criteria. If you're identifying evidence, please state where it was presented before the Historic Review Board. It may be that we have to interrupt testimony in order to identify whether or not it's new. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open, so long as it doesn't contain new evidence. Any written materials mailed to the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If the City Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the City Commission's consideration. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be adjudged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, Oregon Revised Statute 197796 requires us to announce the following. The failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Does any commissioner have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare?
No.
No. And I'm asking with regard to both appeals, both the Mr. Combs and also the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association.
No.
No.
Have any of the commissioners visited the site?
Yes.
Yes.
For the record, 3 commissioners have visited the site. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any commissioner regarding these disclosures? Seeing none, we will now commence with the proceeding. And before we move to the substance of the appeal, we have received a fee waiver request from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. And I want to sort of resolve that first, and then we'll move into the substance. So I ask that you, I've just said that the record is closed and we won't take new evidence, but with regard to the fee waiver, we will, because this is a procedural issue. So I would ask that you first open the record for the limited issue of considering the fee waiver request. In this case, the issue is Oregon City Municipal Code 1750-290 provides that appeal fees shall not be charged for an appeal filed by a city-recognized neighborhood association so long as the appeal has been officially approved by the general membership or board of the neighborhood association at a duly announced meeting. Earlier this morning, the attorney for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association submitted a resolution indicating an intent to appeal HR 17-04 and requesting a fee waiver. So this is what is required to satisfy the fee waiver provision. And so it satisfies the requirement. So staff would recommend that that you open the record, accept these materials, close the record, and grant the fee waiver request, and the $50 appeal fee would be returned to the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association.
Okay, I will open the record for the limited issue of considering a fee waiver request. Is there a staff report?
I just gave it to you.
Okay.
And accept the documents that were submitted today?
So I just opened the record. I need a motion.
Okay. Does it need a motion?
Sure.
Okay. So I move to accept the 2 documents that were submitted today regarding resolutions from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association related to the appeal fee waiver.
Second.
Do you want to move to
And
approve
approving the fee waiver.
the fee waiver?
Yes, I want to approve the fee waiver.
Second.
Okay. Is there further discussion? Call roll.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Mankelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. So now we're on to PC 18-031, AP 1701, and AP 1702, Appeal of Historic Review Board's June 27, 2017. Approval with conditions of HR 17-04, Historic Review for a new Public Works Operation Facility in the McLaughlin Conservation District. Are you going to do the whole thing again, Carrie?
Has anyone new arrived?
No.
Okay. No, I won't do them again.
Okay.
But I just want to ask again, any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias to declare with regard to this appeal?
No.
No.
And you all just disclosed that you visited the site, and so anybody wish to question the commissioners about these disclosures?
Okay.
Seeing none, before we move to the staff report, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background. Again, just to reiterate, the City Commission may not consider any new evidence in its review. The City Commission's review is limited to the issues raised in the Notice of Appeal. I want to tell the City Commission of the various staff roles in this proceeding. This is a kind of different case because the city is an applicant and the decision maker. And you got to remember that the City's Commission job here is to sit as the judge and review the application against the applicable approval criteria. I presume you all understand that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Staff's role here, the planning staff, and my job is to assist the commission in its review of the HRB's decision. This means responding to any commission questions and making sure that the proceeding follows all of the applicable state and local rules. Public Works staff is here to present and advocate for the project. They have their consultants here, and they're going to present just like any other applicant would do. Part of my role in guiding the commission through this process is to first deal with the record. I left on the dais some materials dealing with new materials. And I wanted to ask the commission to consider a number of items that were raised in the appeal.
No, I don't.
You don't have the memo?
I don't. They do, but I don't have one.
Your notebook right there?
Oh, I do. Sorry.
Never mind.
So this is a sort of 1.5 pager that summarizes the materials that have been received into the records since the HRB made a decision. One of the appeal issues raised by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association is that the record included new evidence, and so this is a response to that, and just to clarify what is before you and what is not. Certainly everything that was presented to the HRB is in the record. Other items that should be included in the record and are summarized in this memo include the notice to the tribal representative, which became part of the record by virtue of an administrative law that says that notices are part of the record. The M&A resolution supporting the request for the fee waiver that you all just added, and copies of the applicable approval criteria, which include OCMC 1740, the 1980 Comprehensive Plan chapter dealing with historic preservation, and the guidelines for new construction. And then today we received a letter from the appellant, Mr. Charles Coombs. Staff believes a portion of that letter contains new evidence. And we have also placed on your dais a redacted portion of that letter. The portions that we are proposing for redaction include a reference to a 2002 inventory document that was not adopted by the Historic Review Board or the City Commission and was not included in the record. That is what's referred to in a footnote in the Coombs letter. The second component that we're proposing for redaction is there's an argument about building scale and compatibility of scale. The notice of appeal did not include a challenge based on scale. So we are proposing redaction of pages 4 through 6 of the Coombs letter. And then finally, at the end, there is an argument about whether or not a new survey would be part of the record, and that is certainly new evidence, so that should be redacted as well. So those are all sort of summarized in this memo, and then on the back there is language of a proposed motion that could address all these things, or you could take them one at a time, whichever you would prefer. But what I'm asking for is a motion to strike the items that we have identified as containing new evidence or as being beyond the scope of the issues raised in the notice of appeal.
Mayor, I'm Charles Combs. Do I have
sir?
an opportunity to address the redactions before a motion is?
You're going to have an opportunity to present your case, and at that point, you will have that opportunity.
Thank you.
I move that this commission reject those portions of the HRB decision dated June 27, 2017, as set forth in the February 17, 2018 staff report, and also portions of the Charles Coombs testimony dated March 7th, as it has been redacted by Deputy City Attorney from the record. These materials will not be considered by the City Commission in making its decision.
Second.
Further discussion? Call the roll.
Commissioner Hyde?
Aye.
Commissioner Mangelberg? Aye. Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Okay.
Now we're ready for the staff report.
Ms. Turway.
Sorry.
Oh, Christina, sorry.
Christina Robertson Gardner, our senior plan.
Oh, here we go.
Thank you, Ms. Turway. Thank you. This is Appeal 18.
And you are?
Oh, my name is Christina Robertson Gardner, planner with the City of Oregon City. This is AP 1701 and AP 1702, which are both appeals of the Historic Review Board Review HR 1704 for conditional approval, construction of a new operations facility, and the Oregon City Public Works Department.
Eric, will you click it through?
One of those nights. The arrow will go down.
Is that a little too technical for you, Chief?
What's wrong? You're out of the room.
You got three boys over there. Can't make the screen.
The clicker isn't working. That's not working.
One Katie or
Space bar works.
three boys.
All right. Let's change.
Oh, I'm thinking this isn't what we're looking at.
Okay, well, I'll start tonight. So the scope of tonight's hearing, as described by Ms. Richter, the appeal hearing will be confined to the issues raised by the appeal, and no evidence or arguments will be allowed. And only the applicant and those persons who participate in writing or orally before the Planning Commission can participate. And Ms. Riggs has a copy of those participants, and she will review them along with planning staff to ensure that only those who are on the record can participate this evening. This is an appeal with 2 appellants where the applicant is also the city. So we will have this slide most likely up for a couple times tonight as we navigate through the process. You'll see step 3 is a staff report. Then we move to appellant's testimony next. So AP 1701 will go first and they have 15 minutes. AP 702 is second with 15 minutes. And then the applicant, Oregon City Public Works, will have 15 minutes. Public testimony for those not appellants are available after that. There'll be rebuttals on all sides, and then we'll close the record, deliberate, and make a decision. So the options the City Commission has tonight, if the City Commission agrees the Historic Review Board findings, they should deny the appeals and provide staff additional findings or conditions as necessary to supplement the final order. If the City Commission determines that the Historic Review Board erred, you can either remand the matter back to the Historic Review Board with specific instructions to take additional evidence or respond to a particular concern, or uphold the appeal and deny the application, reversing the Historic Review Board's decision. Right now, any decision, we will have a tentative decision tonight and return back on April 9th, asking the City Commission to adopt the additional findings in final order. Quick timeline, on June 27th, 2017, the Historic Review Board approved Phase 1 of the proposed Public Works facility. It was appealed by 2 parties, Mr. Charles Coombs and the McLaughlin Neighbors Association. But this is really the first step on a longer process to implement the Public Works facility new construction. The next step is amendments to CPO 901, which is the is the master plan, which was approved in 2009, as well as a detailed development plan of Phase 1 and any geologic hazard review that might be applicable as part of that process. Here's a quick layout of the site. These are the properties that have been identified in the notice, both of the historic notice and the appeal notice. This is a conceptual layout of the full phases of the Public Works operation. I'll leave the details to the applicants to speak through, but the Historic Review Board did look at the big picture. They discussed the different phases that may happen, but most importantly, the Historic Review Board made their conditions based just on Phase 1. Tonight, one of the major criteria for this evening is Oregon City Municipal Code 1740 historic overlay, specifically exterior alterations and new construction. There are some demolition review decisions, and that's in the staff report, but the Historic Review Board relied on really the new construction standards because exterior alterations are related to designated historic structures. The Armory is not a designated structure in Oregon City, and therefore it can have exterior alterations without being reviewed by the Historic Review Board. So the Historic Review Board looked at the new construction standards in Oregon City Municipal Code 1740. Specifically, in regard to Phase 1, the Historic Review Board looked at the actions that the Public Works proposed for Phase 1, and in the staff report, they had specific allowance of what can be done in Phase 1, as well as conditions of approval that relate to that. So if you have any questions about what is Phase 1, we can go back to this slide this evening. In general, the Historic Review Board made kind of 3 major findings. They limited to evaluating a request for certificate of appropriateness to the demolition review of the non-designated structures on the Public Works site proposed as Phase 1, and new constructions of buildings in the Public Works property for Phase 1. The comments related to the construction of the use of the redevelopment sites as transportation trails, park, and general livability they found were not within the scope of the HRB review, and that these questions should be directed to the Planning Commission during any amendments to CPO 901, which is the master plan. Any future phases, so phases 2 and 3, were not considered by the Historic Review Board as part of this review and required to go back to the Historic Review Board at those subsequent phases. So in their hearing tonight, we are combining both appeals, and so a lot of both appellants had grounds that we've kind of combined together into a joint staff report. And I've identified kind of 5 major grounds for the appeal. 1, failure to protect historic resources. Staff and the Historic Review Board found that none of the non-structural related features identified by the appellants were designated for protection or in the Oregon City Municipal Code, so they were looking at new construction. Notice issues, as Ms. Richter indicated, the notice questions have been properly summarized and identified in the posting, as well as the SHPO and the tribe's notice, so those have been resolved. Additional criteria and comprehensive plan policies. The appellants felt that the HRB failed to consider plan policies related to transportation, livability, open space, scenic views, natural resource, water quality, and parks and recreation. The staff and the Historic Review Board found that these plan policies did not relate to the preservation and protection of designated historic resources and were not germane to this review. There were design issues raised by Trent Premor. The Historic Review Board found that the design, as proposed and conditioned, is compatible. And the applicant has provided some additional responses as Exhibit 3 in your packet that kind of go through Mr. Premor's comment item by item. And finally, the parkland designation. That the appellants argue that the site has been designated parkland under the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. The staff and Historic Review Board responses, the elements of the comprehensive plan that are applicable are the ones directly related to the Oregon historic preservation objectives set forth in the municipal code, which is 1740, and not the rest of the comprehensive plan, just the applicable sections. So tonight you have options, as I said. There are 3 proposed motions to deny the application, to remand portions of the appeal to the Historic Review Board, and to deny the appeal and approve the application. So these are available for you as you move through the hearing tonight. And I have back to the appeals process, so I can leave this up as we move forward. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Okay. Any questions? Then we'll have, is staff report? You just gave the staff report?
Yeah.
So we're going the appellants first and then the applicant?
Yes, we're doing the appellants first because they're the ones who have raised appeal issues, and so we want to hear what the appeal issues are, then the applicant will respond to those appeal issues.
Okay, Mr. Coombs?
Thank you. I'd like to address the evidentiary issues. First of all, I understand that the reference to the 2002.
Oh, sorry. Could you state your name and city of residence for the record, please?
My name is Charles Combs, live in Oregon City.
Okay.
The reference to the 2002 inventory documents was stricken, and an argument about building scale as well as information regarding a new survey. So I object to that because Oregon City Municipal Code Section 2.28.070 sub D allows additional evidence to be submitted in these appeal proceedings. And certainly the 2002 inventory documents would be considered additional evidence on a relevant issue that I've raised. In addition, the argument about building scale was raised in my notice of appeal. One of the grounds for appeal that I raised was that the decision misconstrues Oregon City Municipal Code, including section 17.40.060, and in a footnote, I quoted subsection F and also subsection 5, which includes the general compatibility of the exterior design arrangement, proportion, detail, scale, color, texture, and materials proposed to be used in the construction of the new building or structure. So I object to that material being stricken. Regarding the new survey, I did add an issue in the material that I submitted as kind of a heads up, really, but that survey can also be used as evidence of the location of the shared use path in the transportation plan. So it's admissible for another purpose as well. So anyway, so I object to that material being stricken. So I'll proceed on to my argument. This is really the wrong location for this expansion. And it's the wrong location because it would be inconsistent with the purposes. It would undermine the purposes. It would work against the purposes for the historic overlay district. because it would block public access to a scenic location within the Historic Conservation District, which residents and visitors have historically had access. It would destroy scenic resources at the site and allow access to the site only by authorized city employees and authorized visitors. And it would build structures, including fences, parking lots, buildings that are incompatible with development in the McLaughlin Historic Conservation District because of their much larger size and scale and the modern functional exterior design of the proposed buildings. So there's really nothing about this proposal that would be consistent with the purpose of protecting, enhancing, and perpetuating such districts which represent or reflect elements of the city's cultural, social, economic, political, and architectural history. It would not safeguard the city's historic, aesthetic, and cultural heritage as embodied and reflected in such districts. And it would not promote the use of historic districts for the education, pleasure, energy conservation, housing, and related public welfare of the city. The design of the buildings and the site are not vernacular, as stated in the staff report. As the 2002 resurvey, which I quoted in my argument, says that vernacular applies to ordinary buildings that are generally built by the owners that don't have additional design elements. So these are not ordinary buildings. They're not simple. For example, the development includes an exterior elevator tower, would not be owner-built, and they do contain stylistic elements. And the scale far outweighs the size of blocks within the McLaughlin Historic District, as stated in the staff report submitted to the Historic Review Board. The decision is not in compliance with the comprehensive plan, which includes the transportation plan or applicable land use regulations. The transportation plan includes a shared use pedestrian bicyclist path that goes around the back of the Armory that apparently is the same route as what's shown in the comprehensive plan for the road around the back of the Armory and in the survey that I submitted. And that path, as seen in the demolition plan from the applicant, will be demolished and replaced with something else, and the gate will be put across it, and a fence will be built around the entire area, and including the area that would be part of that shared use path in the transportation plan, which is also within Waterboard Natural Park because it constitutes the boundary, and anything south of that, or including the road, that boundary, and anything south of it is within the natural park. So that would require, the city charter, section 42E, defines Waterboard Natural Park as that area within the road that goes around behind the Armory from John Adams Street to 2nd Street. And it excludes anything north of that. So since part of this area is within the boundary, within that road around the rear of and south of it, it's partly in the natural park. So it would require a vote of city residents in order to approve it. So basically, as I said, this is an inappropriate development for this location, and the City Commission should reject the HRB decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boss?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just need to go back and grab a few exhibits. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Jesse Buss. I represent the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. I also live within the McLaughlin neighborhood boundaries. So first, just a little recap. It's almost 3 years ago now that the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association first raised issues, concerns about the parkland nature of the area that Public Works wants to expand into. And in that time, a lot has happened. So it was summer of 2015, and not everyone, I believe, on the commission now was on the commission then. And at the time—
Excuse me, is this in the record?
Well, I was going to circle back to that issue, Carrie. I can address the evidentiary issue before I continue on my testimony here.
What happened in 2015, is that in the record?
Frankly, I'm not sure if it's there yet. I'm just trying to recap how we got to where we are.
Okay, well, this record, this hearing is on the record, so if you're going to raise facts that aren't in the record, we can't consider them. So I need to know where in the record they are, or we can't consider them.
All right. Well, I can't cite you to somewhere in the record where I gave a history of how we got from A to B here, but I will say, on the issue of this hearing being on the record, the code does say that the hearing is on the record, but on the record typically means that it's being recorded. It's on the record. This hearing is on the record. It does not mean that you're limited to the evidence below. As Mr. Combs testified, Oregon City Municipal Code 2.28070, which specifically governs all appeals from HRB decisions, says that the City Commission shall consider the record and such additional evidence as may be offered.
You want to pause the clock?
Sure.
So, what's going on?
The appellant has cited a provision of the code that appears in the Historic Review Board